Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Johnson. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Voicescape, and I'd like to welcome you to this, the third in our series of webinars focused on the importance of resilient relationships in social housing. Obviously, a theme that's really come to the fore for us recently, given the new and different challenges that we've been thrown at within the social housing sector. We've got a great range of speakers with us today, but also I've noticed already a great range of people joining us on the line as well. I'm just going to have a quick look at who's in the room with us. Excellent. We've got Jason Gould from Hull City Council. Welcome, Jason. Hope you enjoyed the session today. Karina from Progress Housing, Karina Lynch, welcome. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of today. Looking forward to your interaction as we work through this session. We've got Angela Raftery, who's from Bristol City Council, quite further afield there. So welcome on board, Angela. Looking forward to your input today and hope you get lots out of the session. And Helen Watson from the Gateshead Housing Company. So again, welcome, Helen. We've got a range of other folks joining us along the way. So a great range of speakers, great range of attendees. So we're in for a really good session in terms of understanding how we need to be building better customer relationships as a way forward to addressing some of these challenges. So, well, we're Voicescape, and we specialise in providing technology and services to help social landlords build sustainable tenancies, mainly through better customer engagement. So as you can imagine, the importance of that tenant-landlord relationship is something that's central to everything that we do at Voicescape. And the inspiration for this webinar series came through a piece of research that we did ourselves, that we undertook shortly after lockdown was enforced, because we were interested in understanding how those restrictions, both in terms of customers, but also in terms of how social housing teams were restricted in their operations, how that was impacting customer engagement and that underlying relationship. And through that research, we gleaned a range of fascinating insights. The report for that is on our website if you want to dig into that in more detail. But by far the strongest theme to emerge from that research was the increasing importance of the customer relationship, of the landlord-tenant relationship, not just the role that it has to play generally in building sustainable tenancies in the way that we do, but also the kind of the new importance in terms of building strength against current and future challenges, which is where this resilience concept came in. So based on that, we thought that this theme's actually bigger than our research and our report, so decided to put this series of webinars together and get speakers and thought leaders in from wider afield within the sector. And I'm really pleased that we're doing this now, because I think shortly after lockdown and as the restrictions were then eased, I think we fell into the trap of talking about COVID and those impacts and our responses in the past tense, you know, how lockdown had affected how we do things, how it affected our customers, as though we could then do the post-mortem and learn and move on. But as we've seen over the last few weeks, COVID and how we respond to that is very much a present tense issue, an emerging story with a range of plot twists that we're going to have to continue to respond to. So it's even more important now that I think that we're sharing ideas, we're sharing learning, and we're keeping in touch on a regular basis as the picture unfolds. And with that, I'm pleased to say that as a range of speakers today that's going to help us with some of this in terms of our response. We'll be kicking off today with Jenny Osborne, MBE, who's Chief Executive at TIFPAS. She's had a range of fascinating insights into how the COVID experience could or should at least influence tenant engagement going forward. And how we could be thinking about how this experience will allow us to reframe the customer relationship going forward, looking at this as an opportunity rather than just a challenge. Unfortunately, Jenny can't join us live today. She's on annual leave at the moment, but we do have a recording of her presentation, and she was live with us at one of our earlier webinars, at which we did a question and answer session. So we do have a Q&A with Jenny also, albeit recorded. Saying that, if you do have any questions for Jenny, please do post them in the questions tab. We will be catching up with her when she returns from leave, and we will get those questions responded to and be getting back to you. Jenny does a great job of ranging over both the strategic and policy context for customer engagement, whilst really capturing the importance of customer voice on the ground. So it's a great presentation. We'll then be welcoming Kay Glue along, who's Director of Operations at 13. A very progressive change agenda underway at 13, exploring a range of innovations in service delivery and planning. And Kay's here to share that compelling story behind the work, and again, how it's all driven by the opportunity that the stronger customer relationships represent. And then with the time that's left, I'll be finishing off with a quick look at some of the insights that we at Voicescape have unearthed from our own research into the all importance of customer relationship. So before we get cracking, just a bit of housekeeping. We'll be running a Q&A session after each speaker. So please use the questions tab in your top right to be submitting your questions at any point during the speaker slots. We don't need to wait to the end to submit those. If there's something that you want to respond to as the presentation is unfolding, please get those questions in the questions tab, and I will be fielding those and putting them to our speakers as we move through. You'll also notice a polls tab in the top right corner as well. We'll be running a series of live straw polls today throughout these sessions, so please keep your eye on that. I will keep reminding you, but it would be great if you could open that polls tab, let us have your views, your opinions, and your input on some of the key questions we're going to be popping up there. We also have a chat room that you'll see in your top right-hand corner. So if there's any discussion, any questions you may want to raise to the group of attendees, in addition to the speaker, then please use the chat group, the chat tab there to be discussing and things amongst yourselves. We've currently got Mohammed from Voicescape in there at the moment to host that chat. And finally, if you'd like to comment on our session, or if you'd like to submit any more questions through social media, then our hashtag for today is Voicescape Thought Leaders. So we're already seeing some activity in chat and questions, and also in the polls. So our first straw poll is now live. So if you wanted to open your poll tab now and check out those questions and have your say, give us your input, that would be great. And I'll be kind of feeding back on those as we move through the session. Okay, that's excellent. So given that there's no fire drills to announce or toilets to direct you to in this virtual environment, I think we will crack on with our first speaker. And I'd like to hand over at this point to Jenny Osborne, MBE, as I mentioned, Chief Executive at TPAS, who will be talking about how COVID-19 has reframed the customer relationship from their perspective. Over to you, Jenny.
Inviting me here today to speak. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you all today. My name's Jenny Osborne. I'm the Chief Executive of TPAS, who we are the tenant engagement experts working across England. And I'm here really to talk about our perspective, our reflections. I'm really on about three things I'm going to try and cover today. So I'm going to focus really in terms of the landlord-tenant relationship. I'm going to focus a little bit back on what's gone on over the last 6 months, obviously. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And obviously that will feed into what I think is going to change over in the future. Talk a little bit about the kind of the more immediate things we've seen change around engagement. And then I'll also talk and I'll end around the kind of the policy landscape. So to give you that kind of TPAS perspective, what the bigger issues may be around how tenants and landlords will work together in the future. So hopefully that's okay for everybody. So in terms of sector response, well, I mean, I think generally, I think you'll hear more on this from the speakers that follow me, but I think generally we can say it's been good. I think, if we take ourselves back to those early days in kind of March and April, a lot of activity across the sector. I think, again, we'll hear a lot about this, I'm sure, and you've already done so, but we've seen a lot of interest, haven't we, in the phone calls. Who would have thought that the humble phone call would come back into vogue in the way that it did, in terms of the primary way of connecting with tenants again? I think those phone calls were really well received in the main from tenants that we spoke to and speaking to organisations. And I think the key thing around that was the amount of information that we gleaned from that. Didn't we learn, who was living in our homes, what their needs were, who they were already connected with, what they were doing in their community. We found out lots of information. So from that perspective, really impressive, really good. I think as well, if I had £1 for every time people have said to me, another aspect of that was important was reconnecting. So housing staff saying to their chief execs, Lincoln Eck, it's been lovely to get back talking to tenants again. It's been lovely to be able to do my job again, talking to people, hearing what they've got to say, and then crucially, being able to act on things, to do something, to make a difference, to put something in place for people. And I think, again, as a sector, we need to take that learning forward and remember that staff have really welcomed engaging back in a face-to-face, be it over the phone or whatever way, with the communities in which they work. And that's really crucial that we remember that as part of our response. I've mentioned loads of new data, got loads of that, haven't we now? So I think the challenge now for us all is, what do we do with it? Where do we use that information? It'll have exposed some gaps that we had in our information, that's fine. We now should have plans to fill those gaps and to do something with that data for the future. I think the other thing I've said a few times, if you've heard me speak before, is it was too quick to get tenants involved in the plans once we went into lockdown. That all happened so fast, didn't it? We just had to react and deal with it on a day-to-day basis. What I've been urging people to do, though, is making sure, as part of strengthening that tenant-landlord relationship, tenants are involved in the recovery plans, the transformation plans, the resilience plans, whatever you're calling them, that we make sure as we come out, and even if we go into fluctuations of local lockdowns up and down, it's going to be so important to make sure tenants are part of the recovery plan in the future. So if we think as well about the community response, I'll just briefly touch on this. Again, I think it's all been said before. It's not just been about the landlords, has it, in the sector? The communities in many cases just got on and did things for themselves, often before landlords or councils did. And I think that's important to remember that, again, as we go forward. We are not always, as landlords, just the rescuers of people. It's a narrative we need to drive out from the sector. Communities are resilient in their own way. Communities react in their own way, and we have to make sure we respond to that. But hasn't it been wonderful to see some of the response that we've had? Real thriving community spirit in places. I think the questions we now have to ask ourselves are, how do we support that in the future? How do we supplement it? How do we help perhaps fund it? Or how do we get out of the way and leave those community groups to get on with what they've been doing, probably far better than some of us were able to do? I think the thing that's interesting and we have to react to now as time goes forward is the growth in online communities as well as our physical communities. So, of course, in the early days, we saw an explosion, didn't we, of kind of Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups starting up. Where are they now? And how do you, as landlords, how do all of us in the sector connect with those, as well as the kind of physical community groups that are out there as well, restarting back up again? So that balance of those two will be interesting. But I think the big thing, isn't it, now we all know, is what is going to be the impact on communities for the long-term future in terms of mental health, in terms of job losses, in terms of furlough is ending. So, poverty, we've got to really think about kind of ongoing support for our communities. I think the other thing, again, I'll try and be sort of quick on this, but I think, I think for many people, it's been a real time of positive relationships with local authorities and partnership working. And again, we can build on that, can't we, now for the future? I think we've been able to demonstrate in many cases what practical impact local action can have. I hope that will lead to driving out some duplication in the future. I hope it will enable us, as I said before, to support other people's efforts better, where they're doing it better, that time to step aside. I think we've seen things like, and we'll continue to see things like stock swaps across the sector increasing in order to make sure that we can deliver services better for our residents. So Paradigm, Guinness in particular, I know I've seen, but there's been plenty of others. And I'm not saying from that small is necessarily better in terms of landlord size, but I do think the importance of being able to deliver locally is going to be more crucially important. So I think we'll see far more of that. We need to make sure in our structures we can connect locally with the people in our homes when we need to, because we don't know what's going to happen, do we, in the future. And then the other one is around decision making. I think it's had an impact over the last few months. I think for many of us, for staff, for board members, for involved tenants in particular, it's laid bare, hasn't it? Some of the inequalities that are in there in our society, not just around housing, but across society generally. And I think we've got to be honest and upfront now about how we tackle those inequalities as board members, as staff members, as involved tenants in the future. What are we going to do? I think as a board member myself, I found it, really interesting around all the stuff, certainly in the early days, around compliance. How are we going to get in people's homes for our gas checks? it's kind of put a human story around all of those reports that I get as a board member, and I hope it has for other people. There's a human story behind every not refusal for access. But I think it's also shown some of the pressures that our contractors are under in terms of working in our communities, and we have to be mindful about that. And some of that, I think we can adapt our processes for the future, can't we? I think in terms of decision making about where we invest in the future, that's been thrown into sharp relief, hasn't it? Where are we going to spend our resource in the future around digital? And I'll come to that a bit more later. The quality of our temporary accommodation, is it good enough? What can we do better from that in the future should we have this again? And what can we do even more than we have been doing to improve our repair service for our tenants? We can make decisions faster when we want to. Again, if I've had £1 for every time someone said to me, Jenny, we implemented in 2 days what I thought was going to take us 2 years. We had a strategy and we did it so quickly. Well, I'm not saying that's going to happen for everything, because we're not going to be in a pandemic, hopefully, as like this again. But I do think it shows that when we need to, we can put systems aside and we can get on with things that doesn't have to be 100% right. They can be 80% right, and we can put things right afterwards. So I think pushing on that, tenants will push on that. But I think we've all got incumbent on all of us to say, what can we do to make decision making faster, more accountable, more in real time, and more based on local insight and local information? I think that's exciting, but we can do more of that. And then, you know, final slide really on this bit is looking at the future of the office. What will this mean for our future relationship with tenants and how we will work as staff? There'll be different dynamics, I think, come out of this in terms of we're not all working from offices in the same way. You know, I took some learning from this. A couple of people mentioned to me, staff and tenants, you know, tenants have said during this, I really hated going to the office actually. Some of these big corporate flashy offices that we've got in the sector, actually what did that used to do for people that were walking in those buildings to a boardroom to have a meeting with a lot of staff lined up on one side of the room and tenants on the other? Did we really do that well? Did we really make that a good environment for collaborating and learning and sharing stuff? I think we'll have to reflect on that. I think what we've got now, very different decision making when tenants and staff are both equally sat on a Zoom call at home, in their own offices, on their own settees. That makes for decision making and collaboration to be quite different. So I think that's equalised out some things. So what will we miss? If we don't all go back to the offices in quite the same way? Well, that's to spin out, isn't it, and to see. But I do think, you know, how we're going to work a bit more equally will be interesting. Okay, so if we just kind of, you know, move on now really to have a think about how engagement has changed. I mean, this is still, you know, obviously a work in progress, isn't it? But a few things I suppose I've mentioned really here. The first, clearly, obviously, is going to be about going digital. I mean, that has catapulted forward in the time since March. In particular, we saw scrutiny teams moving online and continuing to run scrutiny projects through those months. Now, that probably would have taken weeks or months to get people to agree to doing that if this hadn't happened. And I think that's really positive, because what people are reporting back to me is that what they're able to do is have more meetings quicker. You can get more people involved. You can get decisions made quicker. So rather than waiting another 3 months for everyone to come to a face-to-face meeting and get everybody organised and take loads of time out of people's diary, we can have a meeting, can't we, in another 2 or 3 weeks, and we can move some of those actions forward. And rather than, again, trying to coordinate diaries of lots of people and heads of housing and whoever else you might want to call to a meeting, we can usually now get in people's diaries a lot quicker because people aren't travelling and it's on a 45-minute Zoom call. So I think that's really, really helpful. I think that is, you know, we're hearing that from many, many people, that it's making things a bit sharper in how people can engage. And it's not just scrutiny groups, it's other groups as well. Obviously, I mentioned before, Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups are all joining up and starting to link together and putting people in touch in a way they haven't been before. But I think one of the downsides, obviously, of digital, and I'm sure many people are experiencing this, I hope you can read that slide, is that digital and access is a problem for lots of people as well. There's some figures there from the Lloyd's Digital Index, but I think, so it's not just a housing issue, it's across society. We've got some real issues in digital engagement, haven't we? We're going to have to address if we want to make this work for the future. We've got issues around infrastructure of digital access. We've got the resources themselves. You know, have people got the right equipment to be able to do it? Can people afford to have internet in their homes? And if they can't, what are we going to do about that? And then obviously there's an issue around skills as well that we need to address. So it's not just a, you know, it's not a sort of an easy win, this around digital engagement, but it is here to stay. We all know that. It's a huge opportunity for engagement, but we've got to have a serious conversation about who's going to pay for it and who's going to fund it. It does give us though huge flexibility as organisations, so we need to bear that in mind as in terms of a value for money agenda, and we've got to capitalise, haven't we, here, that we can get to other tenants like we've all been asking for years. How do we get more tenants involved? Well, this is one of the ways we can do that, because we can get people involved faster, for shorter periods of times, and in ways they want to be engaged and in ways they're comfortable with. So, you know, that value for money agenda around digital engagement has got to be an argument I think we could all win, and I will do something about quite successfully. What else has been happening over this time? Well, if I sort of talk a little bit about from a TPAS perspective, we've kind of renamed some of our consultancy work that we've been doing around re-engineering engagement. And I think that's where kind of most people seem to be landing now, wanting to talk to us about taking this time to say, we've learned so much over this time. We realise we want to get closer to our tenants. We realise we want to hear even more from people we hadn't heard from before. How do we do that? How do we create the structures in our engagement practices, in our engagement culture, to really, really start again and really kind of motor through on this and make a difference quickly. So we've been talking to lots of organisations on this and talking about, particularly around hearing from those voices that you don't always hear from. I think that's always something people are looking to hear about. We've been using a new kind of structure to sort of talk about that, a new kind of model, if you like, a new pyramid to talk about that. Hopefully it's kind of self-explanatory. But, you know, one of the outcomes from the Social Housing Green Paper in 2018 was to make sure that people had engagement frameworks that were really open, transparent and accountable, but really able to evidence and really demonstrate how tenants have been listened to. And part of what this pyramid's about is about really showing that. So hopefully it's helpful for the sector. I'm really hearing a lot more from people about how can we prove that we are hearing from people and what they've got to say. Just excuse me while I move some notes slightly along. It's they just fell down, but there we go. That's what happens on these meetings, isn't it? So I think, you know, these accountability models, you know, they've got to involve the board, haven't they? They've got to involve our governance structures, senior managers, senior staff, all staff actually, to make sure tenants' voices are heard at all parts of the business. We want to see engagement, I think, don't we, all of us, for the future that really does influence, challenge, change services as a result of tenant involvement. I think this model tries to set some of the guidance to doing that. So obviously at that kind of be aware level at the top, that's for all residents. We all want, in some ways, our tenants to be aware of who we are and some of the things that we've got out there. And that might literally just be that they're aware, you know, that we've got a call centre. It might be that they're aware they can get an annual report from us, whatever it might be, a conversation. That's all it might be. And then as the funnel changes, we get more levels of involvement, but probably from you know, less people, and that's fine. That's how it should be, isn't it? People might want to kind of opt in a bit more. So yeah, I'm happy to be contacted every so often on this, or people might chip in with doing surveys, step walkabouts, whatever it might be. And then we move up to the kind of more involved engagement that people would probably associate as the kind of more traditional sort of stuff, but isn't really. It's just because it's more formal structures and it's less people involved. It's still part of this whole pyramid of engagement where we might get tenants involved in co-designing new services from the start. We'll get people obviously in scrutiny involved. We'll get people taking part in AGMs or whatever it might be. So we move through that. And then we end obviously with kind of the real leading that might go on, probably, you know, particularly from tenant board members, but also increasingly across the sector, we are seeing the rise of kind of subcommittees of the board, but with real delegated powers to talk about customer-facing services, with budgets and with responsibilities to really hold the main board to account on, are you actually doing what you say you're going to do in terms of listening to tenants? So I think that's a structure we can start to look at far more in the future. And then finally on this section is around where's the evidence, and that's linked, isn't it, to all of what I've just talked about in the pyramid before. As one of my consultancy managers says, it's much harder to dismiss evidence it's easier to dismiss opinion. And I think that's somewhere about it encapsulates some of the criticism of engagement has been over the years, isn't it? Oh, it's just the opinions of a few tenants that are involved. Well, those opinions are valid, but yes, of course, what we want to do is widen that out and make sure we're hearing the opinions of lots of people, but also supplement that with the data and the analysis that we should be getting in now, and we are far more capable of doing in our organisations. Our mantra should be far more, can we test it? Can we prove it? And that real evidence-based challenge that I think we need to embed in the sector, drawing on that range of data, range of insight from far more people, is a mindset that we've got to create now in our staff, in our boards, and in our tenant base. You know, it should be about both of those things, shouldn't it? Qualitative and quantitative information that are all feeding in all different parts of the business to create a mindset, a culture that says, I am going to make sure that what we do, how we change our services, is based on what tenants are telling us from a range of perspectives. And then that comes back to something we've talked about a lot, haven't we, since Grenfell? You know, are we really ready to listen? And I think, you know, again, the pandemic has thrown that again into sharp focus for us. And I think generally tenants would say, well, this isn't complicated. All you've got to do is listen to us and get to know us and what we need and what our requirements are by doing that. If you really listen, we spend a lot of time, I think, in the sector spending money, sending staff on and involve tenants on courses for how to write reports, give presentations, facilitate. It's all about transmitting, isn't it? I think we need to gain better skills as a sector, all of us, and create that time to really, really, truly listen, to hear what tenants are telling us, and also those that aren't talking out. What by not speaking out are they saying, in a way, I suppose? We've got to create the mechanisms, we've got to create the culture, we've got to create the systems that can hear voices that are speaking out, but also using that, what we're being told in other ways across all different mechanisms to tell us what tenants really do want. Okay, so just to kind of get to the final part really of my presentation, you'll be pleased to hear, I'm sure. It's just around the policy environment. Just very quickly want to kind of bring it to that level. All of that's been going on over the last 6 months, but where are we in terms of the rebalance of the tenant and landlord relationship from a policy perspective? Well, certainly over the last few months, I'm sure none of you can have failed not to have heard from Fiona McGregor, from the regulator, over the last few months. She's been very clear, I think, in her messaging, what she's been saying in about what people should be getting on with, what people should be doing. I can't believe there can be a board member or a staff member out there in the sector that isn't sure of the direction of travel of the regulator. They are going to take a far bigger interest in tenants and the tenant experience. I think, again, what's been great about this period of time is, you know, tenants have heard from Fiona themselves. They've heard from the regulator and lots of other people in the sector, so they know it too. So they've not had to miss out by not being able to trundle down to London for big sector conferences. What's happened over the last 6 months, we've been able to hear from a wider range of voices, and tenants have heard that directly. So I think tenant board members in particular have a real role to play here in ensuring that boards are getting this, that the regulator is going to take this really, really seriously in the future. I think the other example from the sector that's been really moving forward at pace over this time is the Housing Ombudsman. We've got a new code for handling complaints, and I think that's really important. I think it's a great step forward. I think it's been well received by the sector and was much needed, definitely. It should lead to faster handling of complaints, better handling of complaints. It should help to drive out, I think, in the future, some of that incessant delay that some organisations insisted on putting into the complaints process to try and stifle complaints and send them in an ever-going loop that never got resolved. We've seen the Ombudsman, haven't we, recently naming landlords, particularly this last week or so, around handling of leaseholder complaints. We know we can all do better on that, long overdue, and we must do that. So all of this will continue to grow from the Housing Ombudsman Service, and that's powerful. And again, tenants, boards and staff will need to make sure they're responding to that. I think the other things that are going on, obviously, are a fair other few things. The most important, obviously, being the Grenfell Tower inquiry is still ongoing. Loads of learning Still to come from that, loads of shocks, I'm sure, still to come in what we're going to hear in some of the evidence. That remains massively high on the agenda, and rightly so, and we have to keep pushing for the change we need from that. Obviously, the building safety bill is out at the moment, and so that huge focus for boards, both from the safety perspective, rightly so, but also from the cost perspective that it will bring in terms of what we need to put right across our stock. TPAS is obviously focused on the resident involvement, the resident engagement side of the bill and the strategies that will be put in place. We'll be keeping a close eye on that and hope and bringing our expertise to how we can make that the best we can possibly make it. But again, it's like everything we've talked about before. Let's do it with tenants. Let's do it with consultation. Let's do it properly, and let's make sure everybody's part of that conversation. And I'm sure TPAS, like many of you, responded to the NHF's Code of Governance consultation last week. We're really broadly supportive of the NHF Code. Again, big step forward. So all of these things are coming together, aren't they, to say the tenant-landlord relationship has to be rebalanced, has to be reset, and has to be better than it has been in the past, and that's really positive. I think the final point, though, really to end on is the white paper that we hope is coming in November. I think everyone in the sector is saying November, so we're going to look really stupid if it doesn't happen then, but I think it is. And the progress on the previous slides that I've mentioned, from the regulator, the ombudsman, and the code, all of this, this is an all part of leading up to the real final changes we want to see from a white paper that delivers. All those tenants that contributed to the roundtables with the ministers and has contributed online over the last 3 years since Grenfell have made it very clear that they want to see regulatory change, that we need to see regulatory protection and support. We want to see increased consumer regulation. We want to see it measured, and then we want to see it acted upon. And we think that's coming in the white paper in some way. And that will drive change, of course it will. But for me, the overriding thing is culture. As Fiona's been saying, you don't need to wait for the white paper. You should have been doing lots of this already. Get your culture right in your organisation. Whatever the regulation brings, you can get that right with having the right culture and driving that with your staff, with your tenants, with your board. It really is an exciting time for engagement. We've got so much we've got right in the past, but now what we can do is focus on getting even more right with that regulatory change behind us as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for that, Jenny. Really fascinating. It's always good to hear you speak, and you again the passion you bring as far as a representative of the tenant voice goes. So thank you for that. Really interesting. I would encourage people who are tuning in to submit some questions for Jenny. We don't need to wait till the end of the presentation to submit questions through the questions tab. I do have enough of my own to keep Jenny busy for quite a while yet, but whilst we're doing that, if you guys out there have anything you'd like to put to Jenny, please do put that in the questions tab. So loads to go out there, Jenny. Really interesting perspective on the customer and a relationship through the lens of engagement. Now, one of the key things there, as you mentioned, is the explosion in digital that we've all seen over the past few months. And I see that that's creating certain opportunities in terms of tenant engagement. But what do you think are the pros and cons of digital engagement within your context?
Yes, I've had to put my headphones on, sorry, so I look a bit stupid now. But anyway, yeah, I mean, God, haven't we been talking about this for months and months and months about, and I think we'd got to a place in the sector that said, of course, it's got to be a blend. It's got to be a blend of digital and face-to-face. What happened in March was we just catapulted to the other extreme of going digital, didn't we? Digital only, which has had its benefits, like I said earlier in the presentation, about getting loads of people online, getting people comfortable with it, getting people understanding this is a way of working that doesn't need months and months of planning and protocols. And, people do behave on digital. All those things we were worried about, they didn't materialise, did they? Of course, everybody's now saying, sort of 5-6 months in, we want to get back to some face-to-face, and that is dead important. So I think, what we've now had foisted on us is you will make a blend of digital and face-to-face, and we can make it work. And we're sort of in the right place to do that. So there's benefits of COVID, but one of the things that's happened is that. So Digital, I think, like I mentioned, digital is great for getting more people involved, getting people involved at different times, different people, different age groups, all of those things. That's great. We've got so many of our tenants now working from home, haven't we? So, now it's a time to test our theories of, well, it's always been because we couldn't get people to come out at night or to come out in the workday. Well, let's test that now. Let's see if that was the reason people didn't want to get involved with you. I suspect there's probably other reasons. There'll be, nobody's forgotten the whole trust issue that we've still got to work on and build before people even want to try and connect with you. I think some of the work that we've done in the behavioural insight work that we've done with yourselves is around, the language we use about people. That's not changed just because we're doing it in a digital way rather than face-to-face. When we talk about engagement, involvement, empowerment, is that really landing with anybody? And I think from a digital perspective, to get people engaged, we really need to think about the language we use and make sure that it's inviting, it's welcoming, it's understandable, it entices people to want to get involved. So I'll let you answer the question. I just think it's exciting. I think there's also just inevitably a need as the next few weeks unfold and months to get people back face to face. My worry, and I think it's human nature, it's not specific about engagement, is people need to build relationships with people. And that's important. And you can do a lot of that over these kind of things. I think certainly for very involved tenants in particular, or tenants that want to come to talk to you about, let's say, service failures, or to help you co-create something quite in depth or complicated, I think, we're still going to want to employ some face-to-face methods for that. So it's nothing more complicated than let's get this blend right now. We've got the chance to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And is there a risk, do you think, now that landlords potentially have experienced how easy or how much easier it is to engage customers through digital channels? And I'm thinking of that kind of tenant voice type of engagement that TPAS specialise in. Is there a danger that providers may start to rely on that now, and there's only certain sorts of engagement that you can get through face to face, and we start relying too much on digital and lose that really kind of more substantial stuff that we can get through face to face? Am I being a bit cynical, or is there a risk that providers are going to move in that direction? It becomes a bit tokenistic.
No, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's what, this is the time now, isn't it, to reflect on some of those. What will there's always a gain and there's always a loss, isn't it? And what could we lose by just trying to do all our changing of services, all of that on Zoom? I think there's a danger it pushes people too fast. I think it's a danger that it asks people to kind of look at things and not have the chance to in-depth check them out and research them. We all know a lot of conversations or bits of information are gleaned before a meeting or after a meeting or as you're walking to the car park. And I don't think, and that's not being trite, I think those are important factors in service design, in a relationship that's collaborative of people working together. So yeah, I think we have to make sure that, because I think there's a danger that people might say, you've done all this digital now, we're investing, we're going to keep investing. To make kind of that money stack up, then we need to move to just digital only, and it's quicker. And actually that's false. That's false economy, isn't it? It is, without a doubt. We're human beings and we need to meet face to face for the bigger stuff that needs real relationship building. You don't build relationships as easy, do we, like this?
No, exactly. We have a question from the audience, and this question relates to those customers who potentially have vulnerabilities or other reasons why digital engagement for them is very, very difficult, if not impossible. And just wondering, Jenny, do you have any best practice examples or any knowledge of what NatFed are doing, or housing providers themselves, to support those folks as the shift towards digital might be leaving them behind a little?
I think, I'm not sure what the NatFed are doing particularly, I can't speak for them. In terms of, I think it has been a real shock for people, again mentioned on that slide earlier about digital access. I think there's been quite a few organisations that have been surprised. So if I just talk from an engagement perspective, which is what kind of I know, then, we had a lot of engaged tenants that were good at, that had access to, email, that had access to being able to contribute in that way, could download documents maybe and all of that. But actually, when we had to switch very quickly to all of this kind of technology, it was hard. It was hard to train people to do that, and it was not everyone had the internet provision or what other equipment to do that. So I think it's I think most house providers I've spoken to are taking this seriously now about how are they going to put in place some strategies to help people. And I think like I mentioned, it's about, and I know Hacked, for example, I mentioned, are talking about this from a community perspective. How are we going to do this seriously in the future if we haven't got people that have got the right connectivity? So how, read an article today in Inside Housing about if we're going to build homes, if we're going to convert office blocks to homes in the future, we've got to do that by putting better internet connectivity in, haven't we, from the start? So I think we've got to have some serious conversations about money and about the funding of this. It cannot be a hand-wringing exercise and going, someone else will pick this up. I think if we're serious about wanting to help our tenants, be it engagement, be it with income, be it with anything, then we as housing providers have to put some money on the table to help them get connected in the way that we would want them to be.
Exactly. It's the bottom line in terms of investment, isn't it? Definitely. You mentioned the white paper there, Jenny. Now, I know TPAS and yourself particularly are very active as far as lobbying goes and taking that campaigning and lobbying role. Obviously, we're looking for increased consumer regulation from the white paper, but what does that mean specifically? What specifically would you like to see coming out of that white paper?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, this is going to be a culmination, I think, of lots of things that have been pincering towards a better deal for tenants. I think we will hopefully see something around a C1 regulation. We will want to see a proactive regulator who is looking at this, is asking for evidence of how tenants have been involved in the decisions that affect them. So I think we're going to see a suite of KPIs, probably of some kind, that we will be asked, providers will be asked to report against. How much of those will be kind of qualitative rather than quantitative stuff? I don't know where that balance is going to land. We were involved in some work early on to help with that. We did some tenant roundtables about what was important to tenants, that balance of the two. Where that'll end up landing, I don't know. But every indication is coming that we are going to see providers having to proactively give evidence of how tenants' voices have been heard at board level, how they've impacted services, and that tenants can then raise that when that's not happened. So that is the step forward that we want to see, the regulator proactively regulating consumer issues.
Okay. And coming from a different direction in a sense, but some folks in the sector would argue that as far as investing in customer relationships goes, actually kind of pounds and pence investment, we've got to put something behind this. The social housing sector not necessarily exposed to the same sort of market forces that a commercial sector organisation might be, in terms of let's invest in customer relationships so that we can increase revenue, we can extend revenue, we can extend loyalty, etc., those commercial factors. If you were sat in front of a hard-nosed FD who was saying, why should I do this? What would your response to him be? How would you convince him or her?
I think, there's the ESG agenda, so some people will be very interested in that. So I think there's that side, but put that to one side. I mean, TPAS talks about, what engagement is about saving money, improving services and long-lasting change for communities. And that, for me, just sums it up. Engagement does save money. I think, Paul Hackett is the person that describes this best from Optivo. He talks about when, with their tenants, they overserved. They did too much. It was ridiculous. Tenants didn't want it. So I think, if you're a hard-nosed FD, to be told, actually, we could cut some things out here. We don't need to do half of that. Don't want it. That's the primary driver. I talked before about driving out duplication. Tenants will spot that quicker than anybody else. Where is somebody else doing this better? So there's a hard-nosed answer for an FD to say we can drive that out. But ultimately, I just think we've got so many examples where scrutiny in particular, and I think that's the key one here, has looked at a service for not much money. It doesn't cost a lot of money to run a scrutiny panel, let's be honest here. We'll look at a service, look at it in detail, and make you thousands of pounds worth of savings just by getting their involvement. My favourite again is always from Optivo. It's an old one now, but it's a goodie. It's £25,000 a year saved just because tenants looked at the rent statement and said we could design this better, we could send it out with information better. if people need hard-nosed figures, there's plenty in there in the sector.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, that's all been fascinating, Jenny. Thank you for joining us. Really interesting presentation, loads of insights to take away, and thank you for fielding the questions as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jenny. Just in case there's any confusion, I'm not in the business of dramatic costume changes. As mentioned earlier, that was a recording from our previous webinar. We'll be moving on to Kay's presentation shortly. I'm just looking now in our questions tabs and the interaction we're getting on the polls. Thanks for everybody for getting involved with that. Great response to our first straw poll. An easy question to get you started there, I guess, in terms of how important is it that social landlords are customer-centric in their strategic planning. 100% response that is highly important. So we've got that sorted. So we'll be going live shortly with the second poll. Again, please keep that interaction going. It's always good to get the input from our guests along the way. We have had a question for Jenny also from Jason Gould at Hull City Council. Thank you for that, Jason. It's a good question. Do you think digital opens up opportunities for engaging in more challenging conversations, for instance, rent arrears? We will be posing that to Jenny when she is back off leave and get back to you individually, but it is a good question, something that we thought about at Voicescape in terms of how we engage customers on behalf of our clients around rent arrears, in that sense that would a digital engagement offer more anonymity, for instance, that would allow a more candid response or allow a customer to be more likely to engage rather than face-to-face or more kind of open conversation. So I think that's a great question there, Jason, and we'll be posting Jenny's response to yourself and the wider group. Okay. So great to get that strategic and policy perspective from Jenny in her presentation there. We're going to move over to Kay Glue now, who, as I mentioned, is Director of Operations at 13. I mentioned right at the top that there's a progressive agenda unfolding under Kay's leadership there at 13. And for us at Voicescape, it's been a pleasure to be part of that journey with them. Some really interesting themes in terms of the role of personal contact with customers when we're all lurching towards a digital future. The issue of using generic decentralized teams when there are kind of trends towards specialization and centralized teams. But anyway, I don't want to steal Kay's thunder. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kay Glue at 13. Over to you, Kay.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Hello, I'm Kay Glue, I'm Director of Operations, and I've been asked to really share how 13 are putting customer relationships at the heart of sustaining tenancies. So who are 13? Well, we're the largest housing provider in the North East with over 34,000 homes. We provide homes and so much more. We're certainly an ambitious housing developer, but not just in terms of growth, but also in terms of wanting to be our customers' landlord of choice. Our properties span from North Tyneside all the way through to York, but the majority is actually in that Tees Valley area. Middlesbrough and Hartlepool are second and fifth, most deprived boroughs in England within the Tees Valley. And I think if you think about customers with lower level income, issues with employment, then you can perhaps appreciate that cash collection is quite difficult for 13. So we have 3 strategic priorities. Our first is for our customers, and it's all about delivering great customer experiences. We want our customers to be fans of 13, ranting and raving for all the right reasons. We want to be our customers' housing provider of choice, and we believe that our customers deserve the same quality and consistency of service, regardless of how they contact us. So we've introduced what we call our touch points. Touch points, you can contact us through telephone, face-to-face, via social media, or through our new digital platform that we call My13. We've been on a bit of a journey over the last couple of years, but we are very pleased with the satisfaction rate of our customers at 89% through our STAR survey, which is independently assessed. And 9 out of 10 customers actually view as easy of access. But as I say, it has been a bit of a difficult journey, and there's certainly lots more to do. So we've introduced what we call our big three, and they will be the focus for us over the next 18 months. So what are they? Well, we want to ensure we have speed and convenience, what we call that our ease and suitability of service. We want to have responsiveness, flexibility of services, and of course we want to deliver real quality, a level of excellence in everything that we do. So what's been our journey? Well, we have been on quite a journey over the last couple of years. We introduced a new operating model in April 2018, really putting neighbourhoods at the heart of everything we do. We really want to invest in the community, and we wanted to make sure that our customers had a real voice. The whole focus of the new operating model was around being easier to do business with. And in doing so, we introduced a new role, our neighbourhood coordinators. Our neighbourhood coordinators have one point of contact, and they are generic in the way that they deliver their services. We actually deliberately introduced small patches so our coordinators could really start to build up relationships with our customers, building trust over time. Prior to the new operating model, we were very specialist in the way that we delivered our services. Perhaps to give you some context, a customer approaching us for a home would actually have to navigate 4 separate teams. And when they did actually get into one of our tenancies, they would have to contact us for a whole range of different things for different specialist services, whether that be a debt team, our tenancy team, or ASB service. The review was actually built on the back of customer feedback. Customers were saying that they were struggling to contact us, they didn't know who to speak to, and nobody was taking ownership and responsibility for their inquiries. And there was concerns around performance, and our performance certainly was not at the level that we aspired to deliver. I think we took a very brave decision. We decided to recruit to all 98 coordinators roles, and half of them were new. Most of those people had no housing management experience at all, but they did have one thing in common, and that was a real passion for delivering great customer experience. And of course, we recruited on the basis of our values. So I thought it might be useful to give a little bit of a deeper dive around our approach to sustaining tenancies. We wanted to make sure that we delivered a very personalised approach, and that's for our coordinators. We wanted to build up relationships right from the start of the tenancy, or perhaps even before. We really have a view around the importance of home visits, that sort of holistic view of all of our customers, knowing when to actually put the right intervention in place, and our coordinators can do that. We've invested heavily in sort of wraparound services, whether that be universal credit or money advice teams, providing support around money worries, or perhaps where there's issues around hoarding or domestic abuse, being able to use our tenancy support service as well. But our coordinators have really an informed view. They know when to perhaps make a hardship payment in order to sustain a tenancy, or to put an intervention in place in order to stop somebody terminating their tenancy. And I think it's probably that ability to be able to take an overview as to the cost of that small intervention as opposed to the cost of an expensive empty home. So talking about new empty homes, well, we introduced a new enhanced void standard. That was very much tailored to our customers' needs. As a matter of course, we offer carpets and an improved enhanced decoration standard as well. Really trying to make sure that our customers get the very best start to their tenancy. With regard to debt, we've introduced some nudge theory techniques, really trying to personalise our letters, and that started to have some good early impact as well. And I think our coordinators really have a great insight, and they know what intervention to make that will really make a difference, whether that's popping into somebody's home, whether it's making the tenancy right at the very start, whether it's a make a difference day, an environmental improvement, perhaps partnership working with the police, or just having a bit of fun. They know what will make the difference so that people want to live in there, that particular neighbourhood, and actually remain in their homes as well. So what did we achieve? Well, 2 years on, we've achieved such a lot. Our debt's come down. We've actually collected more rental income. We've got fewer evictions, and less enforcement and legal action means less cost as well. It's not all about debt though. We've actually put £2.2 million back into our customers' pockets, and our void performance has improved too, not just in terms of numbers coming down, but also in terms of relet times as well. And if you combine all of those things alongside high satisfaction levels of 89.1%, and we're very proud of our Net Promoter Score of 53, then we've certainly started to make a real difference. And then, of course, the pandemic struck, and we've had to do a new way of delivering services. All of our colleagues are working from home, and they still are. We've actually always worked quite agilely, and I think what we've recognised over the last few months is that it provides a much better work-life balance working from home. Our colleagues' Net Promoter Score is 56%, and as a result of everything that's happened over the last few months, I think we've decided as a business that we're going to continue to work from home in the future. We have had to be really creative in the way that we deliver services. We've recognised that we've had a lot of pressure on services such as universal credit, money advice, and particularly our anti-social behaviour service as well. So we've had to do things in a very different way. I think the neighbour coordinators with their sort of trusted relationships has really helped get the right intervention in the right places over those early months. And of course, we've done, everybody has done around sort of virtual face-to-face conversations, but not just in terms of colleagues, but also with our customers as well. We've introduced unaccompanied viewings through new keylog technology, and you can see there some pictures of our money advice and employability team, and they really have been doing some Facebook live sessions, and they're getting about a reach of between 2,000 and 3,000 people viewing that. So we're actually getting a wider reach for our customers as well. We've always introduced and been using Voicescape. We introduced it in terms of text messaging and outbound calls. We've been using it for collection of garage debt, former debt, perhaps informing our customers when there's been a change in housing benefit, or covering sort of low-level debt recovery. But what we realised during this sort of few months is that the actual possibilities are endless with regard to using the system. And the best example I can perhaps give you is in relationship to our welfare calls. As we did, like everybody did, we made manual calls to all of our customers, checking in to see if they were okay. In those first sort of couple of months, we had 20 to 30 colleagues making calls, and they managed about 3,500 calls each month. Well, we decided after a while we needed to automate this. We needed to contact much more of our customers. So by automating it, we managed to cut down the time to complete those calls in half, and we only used 7 colleagues to do it as well. So really getting a much wider reach for what we were wanting to achieve. So we've had to look at things differently during the pandemic and challenge everything. And I've got a bit of a catchphrase saying, why we're doing it and does it add value? I think when you've got risk to your income, you've got concerns around the economy, you perhaps can't take the legal action that you would want to, then you do have to be much more proactive in your approach and push things more into the support side. We've all got limited resources, so we need to make sure we're redirecting that resources where it can add the most value. During the whole of lockdown, we've actually reviewed our activity levels, really trying to understand how long it takes us to do things, how much resources it take, and actually it's really enlightening, and it's something that I'd suggest everybody should look at. We've also reviewed our customer journeys and understood that we need to be doing far more at first point of contact in order to improve the customer experience. I think what I've learned during the last few months is that our customers are far more resilient than I ever imagined. During all of those calls, only 5% of customers needed us. And when we actually asked our customers how important was that neighbourhood coordinator, their view was it absolutely was, when they already had that relationship, when that trusted relationship had already been established. But actually, for the vast majority of customers, what was important to them was the speed and efficiency of dealing with that particular inquiry. And if I think about myself, I don't think I'd be any different either. During the lockdown period, we've asked our customers for some feedback around the technology. I think we're a bit anxious and a bit worried about what their views were, but actually they've really embraced it. They feel that it provides them with the opportunity to call back at a time that suits them. We've been able to have a much wider reach. And for our customers, they've been very impressed with the early intervention approach, meaning that they can actually take early action themselves. We've actually been doing a piece of work with Voicescape around behavioural science, and we've realised that we spend far too much time on low-level debt when actually a nudge, perhaps a text, a different way of automating that low-level intervention could free up time for our colleagues to really make a difference where it's most needed. What I'd always suggest is that if you can spend some time listening to your colleagues, explaining what that low-level debt recovery approach looks like, you can start to very quickly realise that as organisations, we're very process-driven and we don't really look at the behaviour of our customers, and we need to do that. So our neighbour coordinators, they do an amazing job. They're fantastic at what they do, but we need to direct them at the places that will make the most difference. And we've recognised we need to take a risk-based approach. Risk-based in making sure that they can really add value to where there are multiple issues and concerns. And finally, I think what I learned through the last few months is that our customers still want choice. In a world of virtual, we ask our customers, do you still want to see somebody in a store environment, or do you still want to speak to somebody face-to-face? And our customers have actually stated that they do. So if that's what our customers want, then that's what we will deliver for our customers. So as I say, we're still offering choice, and this is our new Touchpoint store that we only opened a couple of weeks ago. It is developed on the concept of sort of the Apple and the Virgin Media stores. I think the original concept was that you'd pop along for a cuppa, you'd use the digital devices, perhaps go along and speak to one of our Touchpoint hosts or enter into an employability training session. So we've not been able to do all of that. We've had to introduce social distancing, but we've still been able to open up the store and provide customers with that face-to-face conversation with our Touchpoint hosts that our customers have asked for. So far so good. Well, I think it would be a little optimistic, wouldn't it, to say that our debt had come down during this period of time. Our debt has gone up, but only by £195,000. And when you view that as a percentage of the debit, the increase is only 0.17%. So that's not too bad in the current circumstances. And our debt would always increase, actually, over the first 6 months of the year. So we're actually £196,000 better than this point last year. And I put that down to all of the interventions that have been taking place over the last few months. We've also been capturing some real-time customer feedback through our contact centre, and not everything goes right. So when things go wrong, then it's about really trying to put that intervention in place to really make a difference for our customers. So finally, where's next? Well, we're going to tackle, of course, our big three through what we call 7 principles. We want to make sure we provide a personalised service to our customers, and I've spoken very much around that. We, of course, want our customers to have choice. We'll be focusing on that consistency, irrespective of the channel of access. As I said right at the beginning, we've been really focusing on trying to deal with inquiries at first point of contact, and I think we've got a bit of work to do around that. And of course, we always want 0 repeats. We are going to drive an appointment structure. We currently have appointments for repairs, but we're actually going to introduce that for all aspects of service, whether that be a money advice appointment, whether it be a debt inquiry, whether that be a viewing, a tenancy matter. We want to provide some structure for an appointments-based process. We will, of course, be promoting the use of self-service and empowering our customers to do that. And we'll be maximising the use of technology. And of course, we can't do any of this without empowering our customers and colleagues to actually make it all happen. So in terms of outcomes, what we're trying to deliver, well, we know if we tackle all of these things, we'll have improved customer experience. And of course, we'll have increased insight. We want less debt as a business over to 13, but we want to make sure, again, that we're providing that consistent, efficient and effective service delivery. And we know that if we put the right interventions in place, we'll maximise the support for our customers will stay longer and also stay in their tenancies. Okay, so thank you very much and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Kay. As promised, a fascinating story about what's going on at 13 there. Lots already to take away. We're going to dig into that a little bit more detail with the questions. We've had some questions coming through from our attendees, which is great. Thank you for that. We'll tap into those shortly. Just a quick update on our polls. The second poll went live during Kay's presentation. And we were looking to understand what's the single main driver for social landlords to be investing in customer relationships. So right through from just improving CSAT scores, reducing complaints, to just comply with stakeholder or regulation, or to have a positive impact on customers' lives or reduce cost to serve. So again, a great response, and overwhelmingly 91% of people polled believe that the main reason is to have a positive impact on customers' lives, with 9% thinking there is a business driver there in terms of reducing cost to serve. I think ultimately it's probably a balance of both of those things, and I'll touch upon that myself as part of a presentation at the end. We'll be going live shortly with our third poll. So thanks again for your interaction there, and please look out for that third one going live, and we can wrap up with those responses towards the end. Excellent. So back to you, Kate. Fascinating story. I'm going to bring one of our attendees in here as far as the questions go. So we've had a question from Chris, who's wondering what was the biggest challenge in shifting to working from home, and if the pandemic was to be over tomorrow, how do you think you'd change?
I think from a challenge point of view, I think what we did really, really well is we planned it. We put things in place right early doors. So actually, right from a week before lockdown, we were actually already working from home. So it wasn't a particularly rushed process for us. It was quite a sort of a planned one. We made sure initially that everybody was safe. So once you've got people safe, that's the most important thing. And then really it was around mobilising to make sure that we could protect our income. And then from that point of view, it was really just about focusing around how we could support our customers better. So we were very lucky in terms of technology. Our technology was really good. We all had laptops. It was very easy for us to start to work from home. I think trying to communicate on Teams is very easy. We've been able to manage to get messages out to colleagues in a much better way. But some of the challenges, I think, were really around colleagues sort of working from home and having issues such as children, homeschooling, trying to get used to being much more sort of working on your own. Trying to build that sort of team relationship, I guess, is a bit of a challenge. And I had some colleagues, obviously, who felt more isolated, who were living actually at home as well on their own. But I think when you have some technology and you have a really good culture in an organisation, you want to make things happen, then actually you can cut across all of these particular challenges. And I work with amazing colleagues across the organisation who found a way through. Who found a way of supporting, embracing technology. Some colleagues were a little bit resistant around some of the technology to start off with, but actually they've really embraced it very, very quickly. They've had to learn, but we've had to adapt and flex how we've responded as well, to really provide this sort of the extra support, and try and make things fun when we possibly could, and try and sort of lift the spirits. And I think everyone had a moment at some point. So I think that has been a bit of a challenge in terms of keeping everyone motivated and embracing what we need to do as a business. But I think also having conversations with customers who were struggling financially. I think some of our colleagues really struggled with some very difficult, challenging conversations. But I think one of the messages that they came back to me was to say the fact that they knew them, the fact they'd already built up that relationship, the fact that they could actually have a much broader understanding and perhaps have some more time with customers actually really helped. And really sort of, I think, has sort of showed dividends in terms of the outcomes that we've been achieved from a mental point of view.
Excellent, excellent.
I think the second part of the question was around would anything change? So would I change anything? I think from our point of view, we're on a journey already, and we've embraced what that sort of approach will look like moving forward. And we want to continue. For us, it's all about choice. It's around digital, of course, but it's also around people being able to pick up the phone, people being able to come into one of our touchpoint stores. And for us, I think we've been on a long journey, but we're probably only halfway through it. So the next part of the journey is around sort of our big three and really sort of focusing on that. So, if everything changed tomorrow and we were able to go back into the workplace, we wouldn't. We've made that decision already. We won't be going back into the workplace. This works for us better as an organisation. We might use the office as a more collaborative space. And I think that's important, the ability to sort of see people, and that's what we miss. But actually, it wouldn't stop us on our journey. We'd still want to make sure we're focusing on the quality of the service, our speed, and being really flexible and really trying to concentrate on what matters most to our customers. I think that's the most important thing.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like you were very quick out of the blocks there as far as the response to the pandemic goes. We've had another question coming in from our audience. So Jenny Daly, who's from Ledger Homes, is wondering, could you give us some more details on the nudge aspects of the changes that you've made to service?
Yeah, we've tinkered in it. That's what I would say. And we're working with Voicescape now on a piece of behavioural science. And I think that will really help us. But we did very, very simple things in terms of our letters. We more personalised our letters. We put some comments on around, things like, did you know how much we spent on investment works? And actually all rental income can actually help make sure that we can have more bathrooms or more kitchens and things like that. We tried to hand deliver letters and actually put post-it notes on the top of the letters saying, "Hi Claire, hope you're okay. Just some information inside. Could you get in touch?" Just anything that made it a much more personalised experience rather than the same sort of bland sort of letters that we bring out the system. During the lockdown, we've actually tried to renew our letters again, and we're adding a bit of colour, maybe infographics in the letters so that it's they're much more easier and engaging to understand. But I think just that opportunity to just personalise it, that makes a big difference.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that, Kate. Sometimes just those little things that can make a big difference in line with that nudge-based approach. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Just a question I'd like to pose to you, if that's okay, Kate. I'm really interested in the move that you've made towards the neighbourhood coordinators. So 98 neighbourhood coordinators, generic officers working in a decentralised manner. When I think from my experience, a lot of the sector is going in the opposite direction, trying to drive efficiencies through specialisation and centralised teams. Could you just expand on that a little bit, what the driver was for that move?
Yeah, of course I can. What I would probably say to start off with is that my background specialism. I was a real advocate for specialising services, thinking that it would be more cost effective, thinking that we would create more consistency in approach, And I would say it's always a bit of a circle, isn't it? We go specialist generic, and learn from each experiences. And there's issues, I think, with both approaches, if I'm being really honest. But I think the important thing about the generic approach is that as businesses, I think sometimes we just think about what's right for us as a business rather than listening to our customers. So if you were a customer, would you really want to speak to 4 or 5 specialist different teams in order to get your answers responded to? Or would you like to just speak to somebody who could do it all for you at the same point in time? So I always challenge people back and say, are you business focused or are you customer focused? And what would you want as a customer? And our customers want to speak to one person who can deal with all of their inquiries. And as I always say, well, I wouldn't be any different. That's exactly what I would want. Some of the benefits, I think, for a generic-based approach is you see that bigger picture. And if you've got very small patches, as patches are less than 300 properties, you do really understand the customers much better. They're not just sort of a whole load of facts and figures on a sheet that you have to ring up to try and get through to get through your rent accounts. They're actually people. They're people who have lots of needs, and actually you get a much more holistic view if you understand everything. And if you've signed that person up right from the start of the tenancy, then actually you've got a whole host of information about them that perhaps specialist teams might not have. Really understanding the customer knows who to contact, they've got that relationship built up, and actually they're probably more likely to trust you and to have built that over time. The one thing I would say is when you're struggling and you do have something like a pandemic, it's all hands on deck. And I know a lot of the specialist teams were sort of reliant on sort of 30 people who had that knowledge and then trying to train up the rest of the business to have a rent conversation. We were really lucky. That's why I didn't mention it as a challenge, because I had 100 people who were completely and utterly trained up in every aspect of money management. The culture is there. It's every contact counts. Every conversation is a rent conversation. So if I'm going into a customer's homes or a neighbourhood coordinator, well, I can pick up a whole range of conversations, but I can always have a debt conversation. And we drive that right the way, that culture right way across the business. That actually it's a conversation that everybody should have, but it's much easier when it's somebody's performance indicator that they're measured on, and if it becomes something that really the teams are getting fully embraced in and really want to deliver, they focus on the right thing, and that's the customer.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Kay. As I mentioned, some fascinating insight for us all to take forward there. We're hurtling towards 12 o'clock, which is our planned close. We may end up running over a little bit, but if there are any further questions for Kay, please do pop them in the questions tab. Kay, I'm sure you'll be fine to come back to those individually if we do run over. So thanks for your time, Kay. Please hang around. There may be time for further Q&A just at the end. Okay. So we'd like to take this just the remaining few minutes to just share some of the insights that we've developed through our own research at Voicescape into that customer relationship question. As I mentioned, we'd undertaken some research just after the COVID lockdown period, and customer relationships is something that is absolutely central to our business, given that we aim to be helping social landlords building sustainable tenancies through better customer engagement. So I'm just going to whip through some of the insights that we've drawn through that research and other research exercises that we've been working on in the past. So when we reached out just after that lockdown period, one of the first things that we touched upon, that we picked up on, was that increased importance that is being placed on the customer relationship. My slide should be moving forward, but doesn't seem to be. Okay, apologies. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Ironed out a little technical glitch. So yeah, the first thing we picked up on was the increased importance that providers are placing on that customer relationship as we moved in through that crisis period. It was almost picking up on a fundamental shift really within the sector, that we don't necessarily have a customer strategy, but that's because the customer is the strategy. a genuine sense that the customer needs to be at the heart of everything that we're doing, echoing what our speakers have been saying today. The other thing that started to become clearer as well, and this reflects some of the question, one of the polls that we ran today, was what could be considered the business case for investing in customer relationships. We know the social impact that we can have through better customer relationships, better service delivery, better outcomes for our customers and in their lives and with their families. But that hard and fast business case wasn't always as clear. And this started to come through in some of the discussions we were having, but also in some of the research that we've done from a more quantitative perspective also. And this stems from one key principle, that whilst we might be delivering services, providers delivering services in silos a lot of the time, customers aren't necessarily living their lives in silos. So what happens is that a particular touch point, the experience at that touch point, the satisfaction or otherwise gained at that touch point, we're starting to see influences customer behavior at all the other touch points. So to take a very basic example, if a customer has a bad experience with your repairs service, then we could be looking there at a reduced propensity to pay rent in the future potentially, or at least prioritize rent, a reduced desire to be staying in for a whole day if we've given them a full day appointment for our gas safety check. So it's that interconnected nature of the customer relationship that actually has an impact on, a direct impact on cost to serve. And again, that was coming through the poll as a secondary but important driver. So it is the social impact, but we're starting to see much more clearly that commercial benefit of investing in customer relationships. And for some stakeholders, then that's the argument that needs to be made. Ultimately, it's a balance of both. And we're seeing here again that the customer relationship, the relationship we have with our tenants, is the ideal way of balancing that dual commitment we have to having social impact and a positive outcome for clients, for customers, and having a commercially viable business that helps investment in other areas. And we're also seeing this coming through in the change in the more sophisticated way that our clients are starting to use their customer satisfaction data. So we have a feedback platform. We're working with a number of our clients to collect and analyze customer satisfaction data. And we're seeing and encouraging our clients along this dimension, really, in terms of moving from a tactical use of satisfaction data through strategic to holistic view. What we mean by that is a tactical approach to customer satisfaction data, maybe using an operational transactional survey to pick up where an interaction hasn't been ideal, something's gone wrong. We can real time be in touch with that customer, remedy the situation, and we preserve that relationship. That's fantastic, a very important use of the data. What we're also starting to do now, though, is make more strategic use of that data by understanding what are the underlying themes within satisfaction or dissatisfaction data that are suggesting areas of service that need improvement. So we then start to think about how we're looking at longer term trends with bigger, more representative sample sizes to dig into those more robust trends. And all the way at the other end, building on the point from the previous slide, if we're collecting satisfaction data and behavioural data from across the piece, then it becomes possible to start homing in on particular service areas where the customer experience has a clear impact on behaviour in another area of the business. So we start to understand clearly where our resource as a provider needs to be directed. It needs to be directed at those areas that customers are most sensitive to and has the most impact on future behaviour. So that level of sophistication we're starting to see is really increasing as a gauge of the customer relationship. So it's a couple of general points there, but now just a few more specific things that we've drawn out of our research. So this will be a teaching grandma to suck eggs moment, I'm sure, for many of you, but it's so important that we get repairs right. To all intents and purposes, for many of your customers, you are essentially your repairs service. And we see in contact data and in customer satisfaction data that the experience and the sentiment around repairs largely crowds out much of the other kind of service experience. And if you think about that from a behavioural point of view, from a behavioural insights point of view, then you can understand why that is the case. I mean, the repairs service is the most specific and tangible experience that the customer has in terms of the value for money they're getting from their rent. Obviously, they've got the roof over their heads, but in terms of that real tangible interface with the landlord and what am I getting for the rent I pay you each week, it's the repairs service that drives the sentiment. So you've got that hypersensitivity around the repairs service and those customer interactions. And again, thinking about this from a more emotional point of view, we may think of stock properties in terms of stock and assets, but our customers are living in homes with their families. It's a very different emphasis. So if you are living in a property that is in disrepair, or there is a defect that's been left for a long time, we are starting to pick up in some of our research that can actually have impacts on self-esteem, on mental health, on feelings of stigmatization, etc. So all important factor to get the repairs right. And if that is done well, then already well on your way to a positive customer relationship. And the satisfaction gained through the repairs service can then sometimes create a buffer for more tolerance for what may be glitches or lapses in service in other areas of the business, is what we're finding. Couldn't do a presentation about customer relationships without tapping into digital, and this really echoes Kay's point really about keeping choice open. And we're seeing this shift generally from a digital by default agenda, get everyone online or get as many people online as we can, through to what we'd consider a digital by design approach. And it's at this point that I like to introduce my mum as a case study. So my mum is 76 years old. She's been a social housing tenant since I was 6 months old. I'll leave it up to you to decide how long that actually is, but it's a very long time. And at the moment, she's fed up with her landlord for what she considers is the pestering that she's getting to be doing stuff online, paying online, reporting repairs online, going online rather than ringing them up for a query, etc. So with my mum's sample of one there, we're seeing that a negative impact on satisfaction, a negative impact on customer relationship through a blanket digital by default approach to engagement. So moving towards digital by design, as many providers are, it's a question not of getting as many people online, not maximizing the number of people that we have online and self-serving digitally. It's about optimizing the number of people that are self-serving. And what that means is, yes, get as many people online as we can, providing it doesn't have a negative impact on satisfaction, providing it doesn't have a negative impact on service delivery. And Kay's examples about preserving choice really speak strongly to the need to be doing that. And at the end of the day, there will be a proportion of the customer base who just want to speak to a human being, and we need to respect that. It's a fundamental human need, really, to have your opinion heard, to feel that it's been taken on board, and that something is being done about it. And that sort of transcends age, transcends demographic, transcends digital literacy. For some folks, for some interactions, they will need that face-to-face or that telephone conversation. Which is why at Voicescape, we're encouraging this distinction between what we'd consider transactional and relational engagement. So looking at the way we're dealing with our customers, interacting with them through this lens. And both these types of engagement have their use and have pros and cons, but it's about which interactions we approach in which way. So a transactional interaction, for instance, would be quite tactical. There's a short-term focus. It's largely a reactive response to something that has happened or has gone wrong. It tends to be organizational focused. It's something that we want from the customer, and tends to be process driven. It's been triggered by an automated or a standard process. Relational engagement, on the other hand, is more strategic. It's about taking a longer term focus. So investing in conversations and interactions with customers, not just to get that short term transactional benefit, but to actively try and strengthen the relationship. It's more proactive. We're reaching out in the way that we did through the COVID period, reaching out to customers to check in on them, not necessarily wanting anything from them, but to offer something for them. And we've seen the feedback that has come back from customers as a result of receiving those interactions. And ultimately more insight driven. So we'd like to think in terms of these two quotes capturing the difference between those two approaches, and understanding what the underlying impact on the underlying relationship might be for those customers who have been in that situation. So sometimes having a conversation to trigger what might just be considered a transactional engagement has the halo benefits of deepening the customer relationship, unpacking other senses of insight and understanding of the customer's situation. Okay. So I've titled this presentation, Get in Touch, Stay in Touch, Be in Touch. Now, I just wanted to take a minute just to share this with you, because it's a framework that we've been developing as a result of the research that we've done to inform a more strategic approach to customer engagement and how we can build those relationships. And what we mean by get in touch, stay in touch, be in touch is taking a more coordinated approach to engagement with customers, moving from that transactional reactive to that more relational proactive. And it comes directly from some of the interactions we've had with our customers, with social housing tenants living their real lives out there, and an underlying sense that wouldn't it be great if what happened through COVID, where landlords were reaching out and checking in, was part of the general relationship with the landlord, part of the general customer experience that the tenant had, that sense that people are keeping an eye on me, or are keeping in touch and understanding my needs in more detail. So those sorts of themes gave rise to this framework that we're exploring at the moment, get in touch, stay in touch, be in touch. So what we mean by get in touch is pretty obvious, that we need to open that conversation in the first place. We need to establish that engagement. But then beyond that one-off interaction, we need to be staying in touch. We need to have a more proactive, coordinated approach to staying in touch with customers on an ongoing basis, not just when we want something from them, not just when something goes wrong. And then ultimately what that leads to is us being in touch. And what I mean by that is being in touch in the sense that we are closer to our customers, where we understand their needs, we have insight into their lives, which obviously then has a knock-on benefit in terms of how we use that insight to better design our interventions, better design services, etc. So it's very much about taking a coordinated approach to customer engagement and having that flowing through a strategy rather than reactive, silo-based responses to tenants and customers when things go wrong. So there's plenty more going on under the hood of that framework. As I said, we don't have much time today to dip into that, but please do be in touch if you'd like to know more. So a whistle-stop tour of some of our own insights there. We have recordings of this webinar elsewhere where I do go into a little bit more detail, but if there is anything more that you'd like to know, please do drop us a line. I'm just going to check in finally with our polls and our response from our attendees. So if there's any more questions, please fire them in now before we let Kay go. We asked our audience in the third poll, how customer-centric would you say your organisation is currently? Again, a good response, thank you for that. So quite a high level of confidence amongst our audience in terms of the progress that's already been made as far as customer centricity goes, because we've got 80% who think they are already highly customer-centric and 20% who think they are moderately customer-centric. So I suppose putting your hand up and admitting that you're not so customer-centric or not customer-centric at all is probably a bit exposing. But yeah, so a lot of confidence out there in terms of how far we're already moving in that direction. Okay, so we have run over slightly. We've had no further questions at the moment for Kay. But if you do have any still that you would like to pose, please remember the hashtag Voicescape Thought Leaders. We will be collating all of the questions through there, and we can get back to everyone in due course. It just remains for me to thank Kay Glue, fantastic presentation, thank you. To Jenny Osborne, thank you for taking part. And of course to all our attendees. It's been a great session, there's been a lot of interaction. I genuinely hope you've taken some things away and that you've found this useful. The recording of this session will be immediately available after we close, and then when we finish the full series of webinars, we'll be issuing the edited version of the whole piece, picking out some of the key insights and some of the key quotes. So please do stay in touch. Thank you for joining us. We have a number of other webinars still to run in other regions, so please check out our website if you want to attend those future webinars. So it just remains me to thank you for joining us, and we will hope to see you again soon.